right, well, understatement of the day, there has been a lot of inspiration in this room, and I can promise you that inspiration is not done just yet. The last conversation today is really focusing on the intersection of technology-driven and community-inspired motivation, and how we can progress together toward ensuring everyone can reach their personal best. Please join me in welcoming to the stage, firstly, Nick Thompson. Nick is the former editor-in-chief of Wired and current CEO of The Atlantic, a position he has held since 2021. And under his leadership, The Atlantic has won 3 National Magazine Awards for General Excellence, 3 Pulitzer Prizes, and was named Digiday's Publication of the Year. It's also surpassed 1 million subscribers, the highest level in its 166-year casual history. While at Wired, he wrote and edited a story that turned into an Academy Award-winning film, and another that turned into the second highest grossing documentary of all time on HBO Max. He's also a longtime Strava user who is no stranger to the athletic journey, as one of the fastest distance runners in the world in his age group. In 2021, he set the American record for men 45 plus in the 50K. And he's also writing a book on how running can help explain the hardest issues in life out next year. And joining him will be the one and only Gabby Thomas, hailing from Atlanta. Gabby is an American track and field athlete and the 4th fastest woman of all time in the 200 meters. She won an individual bronze medal and a relay silver medal at the 2021 Summer Olympics in Tokyo. And 1 year out from the 2024 Paris Olympics, Gabby won the 2023 National Championship in the 200 meters and, if that wasn't enough, the 4x100 meter championship gold. Gabby graduated from Harvard after turning pro in 2018, and in 2023 received her master's degree in epidemiology at the University of Texas. I now feel lazy. Please welcome Gabby and Nick.
Okay. What an honor and a pleasure to be on stage with you, Gabby.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to start with a factual question about your mother. And I read the New York Times story about you recently. There's a wonderful story about Gabby. And in it, in the very beginning, it sort of presents your mother as someone who really only wants you to get a PhD. She's more interested in your academics. Her mother is quite a well-known academic doing very important work. And he sort of sets up as though she's like supports your running but really wants to be an academic. But then at the end, it's revealed that she's the one who saw your running talent. She's helping you along. And so I was curious, if your mother could pick one, gold medal, PhD, in the next 5 years, but only one, what does she choose?
What an incredible question. And I do not hesitate to answer it, the PhD. The PhD.
Wow.
And that is not to say that she doesn't support my track career. She loves what I'm doing on the track. But my mom has always instilled the most important thing was an education. And that is because of how she grew up, and it translates in how we grew up. But my mom grew up in Mobile, Alabama, just straight poverty, many brothers and sisters, didn't have much. And my brother and I watched her in real time go from that to creating such an amazing upbringing and environment for us to grow up in. And I like to joke, my twin brother and I, we're her ride or dies. She was a single mom, 2 kids, didn't have 2 dimes to rub together because that's just where she came from. But watching her go from a preschool teacher to a high school teacher, go back to school, get her master's, go back and get her PhD, and then become a professor at the University of Massachusetts and create so much opportunity for us, that's what inspired me to do what I do. Because I watched it happen. And I mean, she beat the odds. That's what she did, and that's what she taught us to do, and I actually saw it. So yeah, she would go with PhD.
That is an awesome answer. Let's stay on this for a second because it's so interesting. So you can imagine her having that upbringing and then saying, I have this incredibly talented, brilliant daughter. I want her to actually make as much money as possible. I want her to go not into running, not into academia, but maybe into consulting. Why is academia the ambition?
So for my mom, education was always kind of the leveling of the playing field. And to be honest, you don't know what your kids are going to be good at when they're born. You have no idea. My twin brother is the exact opposite of me. I mean, he does not do sports. He is very artistic. He's artsy. He's in graphic design. And he actually is in academia now himself. He just accepted a position at Eastern Michigan University for graphic design, which is incredible. But we couldn't be further from each other, so she can't predict what we can do in life, but she could predict, how she can set us up for opportunity. And education was that. And she was 100% right. And throughout, my upbringing and growing up, I did understand where she came from. And I understood where we came from. Growing up, we didn't have much because she was still on that path. We were with her along that journey. But I always had this feeling in the back of my head that I do need to be making a difference. I do need to be working towards something. I do need to be working towards education. I need to set myself up because we don't have a fallback. So I did understand that from an early age, and I do believe that still stuck with me. But education for her, and I still believe this now myself and for my future kids, is a way to level the playing field. It's a way to get access to opportunity, and that's coming from a professional athlete.
Wow. And is it possible your brother is artsy not because he loves arts, but because his sister was whooping him in sprints when he was just having watched my kids?
We did do a lot of races. No, he was faster than me, and he actually was very good at sports. It's just
he was faster you until when?
Oh, God, I mean,
because girls and boys are pretty much equal till like 10 or 11, then usually boys are faster.
That's a good point. He's always been faster than me. He was always really good at sports. It just wasn't his interest.
Huh. Sub 21.6 for him right now?
Yeah, I'll challenge him to a race. He'll be at the, I'm competing in LA at the UCLA track meet on Saturday. He'll be there, so maybe
awesome.
I'll challenge him to a race.
It's like Sidney McLaughlin gets her brother. All right, so
yeah.
Let me ask you another question, because this is one of the things that I'm most interested in, and it's one of the things I'm writing about in my book. There are some pro athletes and some people who become the very best at it, who have other things that they do, right? And they believe that if they had a bad workout, the fact that they've gotten a master's in epidemiology, they also work in a clinic, that helps them move on. And there are others who believe the opposite. I'm going to read you a quote from one of the women I'm profiling in my book. There's sort of 6 characters I write about. And she was once the top American miler in the country. And she said, if you're sprinting with someone and they feel solid in their future and you don't, you have this something else that you can pull from. It's that totally desperate feeling, like I could die tomorrow. So she, like you, was extremely intelligent, but she very much in her 20s refused to do the other things on principle. And I'm curious what you think about that.
I think that's really interesting, and I do believe that there's probably so much truth to that and so much realness to that, just that raw, authentic desperation for success. But where I come from is, what got me into track is watching the other athletes compete and falling in love with that. I watched these great athletes, like, I don't know if Alicia Montagna is still in the room, like her competing. I watched like Allison Felix, Sonia Richards-Roth. I watched them compete, and that was inspiring to me. And what I think sets me apart from other athletes and what makes me so good at running is my love for the journey and my love for the process. I am obsessed with self-improvement. I've fallen in love with it, and that's what gets me through track. I'm in love with the longevity of the career, and that also permeates to other aspects of my life. It doesn't just stop with track, right? If it stopped with track, it wouldn't make sense, because I also love self-improvement in the education space, and that's why I do it. If I were to focus only on chasing medals, chasing times, chasing these figures that are somewhat out of my control, I'm not so sure I would be here right now. I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't find success in track and field. It's not sustainable. So it's hard for me to imagine going to training every single day and fixating on something that is out of my control, which is winning a race. But I can focus on how I get there every day. Do I love going to practice? Am I going to get this much better today? And that's what I'm focusing on, and that's where my mindset is when it comes to track and field and training.
We go back to this point that if you didn't have something else, you don't think you would be where you were. You mean that if you had put all of your emotional energy into track, it would become too scary, it would feel like it wasn't worth it, you wouldn't be able to Like you would put in less effort because it would seem to be, explain more what you mean.
I think that innately, I'm so focused on self-improvement and being the best version of myself that I can be, that I can't just put all of that energy into track and field, right? Track and field, that's just a piece of me. It's a piece of what makes me happy. It's a piece of my journey. It's a piece of my process. It also applies to every other aspect of my life because that's just who I am. And of course, that's going to be applied to track and field. I can't see a way. And to your point, I do think there's also a benefit to having these fallbacks. There's a benefit to having a distraction. There's a benefit to having a bad day at the track and getting to go home and refresh and focus on something else. There's a huge mental benefit to that. And at the end of the day, our sports are a mental game. There's a big physical component, but like we talked about a little bit backstage, so much of it is mental. And for some people, it really might help to think, okay, I'm dialed in. My opponents are not dialed in. They're doing other things. I'm only doing this, so I have that edge. That might help them, and that might be the piece that they need for their mental game. But for me, that's not what I'm doing. I can't play that game.
Oh, so this is interesting. So do you think that like one of the Jamaicans lined up against you in Paris is going to be there and thinking, hey, Gabby's also an epidemiologist. Oh my God, I'm definitely going to lose to her. Like she's got all this other stuff going on.
I think they're probably thinking she's a scary girl. Like that's someone who can handle a lot.
All right, let's go back to discipline for a second. So you said that you're extremely focused on self-improvement. Does running is clearly a sport, as we all know, all of us who use Strava, that encourages, because it's so simple, it's just you. You can see you improved. You're 2/100ths of a second faster, you're 200 seconds, or I'm getting older, I'm slower, right? I'm on the descent. And you can watch it, and Strava tells you just how much worse you are than last year. I was actually saying that one of the product features, they need to hire some people over 45 for this new compare with yourself product, because it gets interesting. But so my question is, did running make you better at self-improvement or more focused on self-improvement, or did the self-improvement exist before the running? Because sometimes picking out the chicken and the egg and the personal self-improvement focus and the running focus is hard.
That is really hard. I believe that self-improvement was always a part of just my nature. It was a part of my upbringing. But I grew up doing sports. So I do think it's incredibly important, especially for young women, to try sports, because that's what started this for me. And then track and field just became another vessel for that. And I've learned so much through track and field. But I grew up playing soccer, basketball. I didn't want to do track and field. Track and field was actually forced on me by my mom when I was about 13 or 14. I did not want to be on that track team, but she knew more than I did, like always.
And did watching the improvements, is that part of what sucked you in?
Yes, and that's part of what sucked me in. Because like you said, it's very objective. You can see what you put in is what you get out in track and field, and that is such a beautiful part of it. A lot of other sports are a little bit more subjective, but with track, it really is what it is.
And has your trajectory been linear? Or have there been moments where it wasn't linear and you were like, my God, I'm not getting better, time to stop?
My trajectory has not been linear. I don't know anyone whose trajectory has been linear, to be honest, of any athletes that I know or any track athletes that I know. But when I was running track in high school, I started because, like I said, I was heavily encouraged by my mom. And I wouldn't even say that I loved it in high school. I would say it was something that I did with my friends, and it was fun for me. And then I had an opportunity to go run at Harvard University, and that was an incredible opportunity. And education was my priority at the time. I wanted to get my degree in neurobiology, and I wanted to do research on autism, and that was my plan for life, and that was it. But being on that track team was such an incredible experience for me. The culture of the girls in that team made me a better person, a better athlete. It pushed me and it challenged me. But there were definitely times when I was running at Harvard where I was so far outside of my comfort zone that I didn't want to run anymore. After freshman year, I called my mom and I said that I was quitting the track team because it was getting in the way of my other goals. It was getting in the way of the research that I wanted to do, because we have a summer postseason and I couldn't stay on campus and actually make meaningful contributions to the research lab that I was in. I couldn't join clubs that I wanted to be a part of. I felt like I was missing out on a lot of social activities, and I didn't want to do it anymore. My coach and I came to an agreement that I would give it another go, another year, and so I did. In sophomore year, I ran track and field again, and I had a very lousy year. I went to NCAAs and got last place, and it felt like the end of the world to me at the time. And then had a very, very mediocre year. And after that, I said, you know what, I'm done. I just forfeited the rest of my season, and that's when I did my study abroad in Senegal. After that, I came back, completely reset, completely refreshed, and just had an entirely new mindset about it. And I decided to give track another go that junior year. And that junior year was my breakout year. That was 2018. I went to NCAAs, same track that I got last place at the year prior, and I won. I broke the collegiate record, and that catapulted my pro career. Thank you. Thank you. But that took a lot of mental training on my end. It took a lot of faith in my coach and my communities, my teammates, and my mom, who told me not to give up on it. And it completely changed my life. But that's only one example of not having a linear trajectory. There are a lot of days where things don't go as planned. But the one rule that I kind of stick by is, I'm blanking on it, but it's the rule of thirds. It's what it's called. And so 1/3 of the time, you're going to have great days where you're feeling very inspired. You're going to be feeling like you can do anything. Everything's going well. Another 1/3 of the time, it's going to feel okay. Just average day. You're getting by. It's fine. And then the other 1/3 is going to have really bad days and really bad times. And that's how you know that you're doing things right, if you're going by this rule of thirds.
All right, well, I hope Paris is one of the good days. All right. All right, we've been talking a lot about...
I train so that if I have a bad day, it's good enough. And I'll tell you that. Tokyo Olympics, those were bad days for me.
Okay.
But it was good enough for a bronze.
Let's talk about some of the complex issues in gender. It's something you're starting this new track meet with Alexis Ohanian for Women Only, which sounds amazing. Let me ask you about some of the hard issues about gender and track. So one of them is you, as now a very prominent female athlete, you're out there, you're running, but you have this obligation to be beautiful, right? And your sponsors expect it, the television cameras expect it, and you're dressed in skimpy uniforms that you may or may not agree with, but there's some complexity there. I was reading a book by Lauren Fleshman. One of the things she writes is, Western beauty standards were part of why I got paid. Does this ever make you uncomfortable?
It's definitely something that I think about, especially as a Black woman in sport. You are very heavily scrutinized for how you look constantly. And, there are some advantages to being a woman in sport in that way, but a lot of the time it can be really, really frustrating. It can be frustrating when all you want to do is go out there and focus on what you're training to do and what your job is, but a lot of the primary focus is on what you look like, and how your sexuality is really being monetized. But I think there's a especially interesting perspective just coming from a Black woman, how there are expectations to kind of succumb to that Western standard of beauty, and it can be frustrating when you just don't meet that and the world doesn't see it.
So how do you fight that?
I think what's really nice about my job is I do have a platform to showcase that strength is beautiful, being a Black woman is beautiful, and you don't have to change or adjust how you compete or how you look for anyone and anybody. And the more light that we can shed on that, the better. The more in track and field, it's incredible. I mean, we have so many beautiful, talented women, and specifically Black women as well in the sport, that are just incredible role models, and they showcase that excellently. And we don't feel like we need to over-sexualize ourselves in sport. We go and we do what we need to do, and we compete fiercely. And I think it's just an excellent example for the younger generation of girls who want to continue in sport. It doesn't have to be about what you look like. It doesn't have to be that shallow. Your contributions to sport don't have to be diminished. And I think we're seeing a better job of that in media, but we still have kind of a long way to go in that regard.
I mean, the amazing thing about track, is that it's the most objective of all sports. Like the fastest person across the line does win. But the fastest person across the line doesn't get the most Instagram followers or the most sponsorships. So you have a very complicated game you have to play there.
Absolutely. It definitely is a very complicated game.
And then tell me structurally, so you're doing this thing with Alexis, and you're going to have a track meet in September, right?
Yes.
It's women only.
Yes.
Sounds amazing.
Yes.
Where will it be?
New York.
Excellent.
Yes.
Well, I will be there with my children. Will it change, like, one of the complicated dynamics, and the reason I think sometimes things are hard for women in track is there isn't a league, there isn't an association, there isn't collective bargaining, there isn't like, you couldn't all walk out, you couldn't all ask for more pay, you couldn't ask for all of your contracts to include pregnancy bonuses. Is this something you were trying to change structurally with this track meet, or are you just putting on a great track meet for women?
No, absolutely. So it's going to begin with the track meet, the 776 Invitational in New York. It is an all-women's track meet, the biggest prize purse in track and field history. So we are really excited about that. But it's a precursor to a larger effort. So there will be an accompanying league to follow. And that is the overarching goal, where athletes do have more control, we do have more say, we do have more power. And the great thing about Alexis is he didn't do anything until he had spoken to all of us, not all of us, but a majority of us, about what we wanted to see different. You know, what did we want to see happen? What did we want this to look like? What does track and field look like now? So he did that research, and the athletes' voices will be heard in this league. It's also just an incredible opportunity because the interest is there. Every 4 years, you know, the Olympics come around and people love track and field and they want to watch it and they're engaged. But we don't disappear in between those 4-year windows. We're still here and we're doing the same thing. It's the same people running the same meets against the same people. So it's exciting because he's going to bring visibility to that. Whenever you want to support women's sports, it can be kind of difficult because you don't know where to watch it or when they're playing or what's going on. And this is going to change that. So I do think it's really special.
Is there anything, so there are a lot of people, we've heard from some on stage, many we've been talking to, who are working to increase women's equity in sports, right? And, you know, Tobin Heath was on the stage earlier talking about, you know, her incredible work. Is there anything, and Strava was talking about night mode, right? So you can know where to run at night, which is particularly valuable. You know, you have to run at 5 in the morning, you're a woman, it's an amazing feature, one of the great features they rolled out here. Is there anything happening right now aimed at increasing women's equity that you think is misguided?
Misguided?
Yeah. Anybody who thinks they're doing the right thing, but actually they're doing the wrong thing?
Gosh, I mean, I don't know. I will say that there naturally just is a lot of virtue signaling going on out there, which is why I'm very excited about the track meet that Alexis is putting on, just because it is very real. It is for women, by women, and there are talks about the equity piece in that as well. So everything is being done right in this case scenario. That thing outside of it, I mean, there's a lot of that going on, but we don't have to get into this.
Okay. Let me ask you about a gender and physiology question. So this woman, actually a high school classmate of mine named Christine Yu, wrote this wonderful book, and it's about how sports studies have been so focused on men, right? And some of it is because of historical bias, but also because scientists like simple things, and women, because of hormonal fluctuations in menstrual cycle, are often excluded from studies. And so as a result, you get some results where like bike seats are built just for men, but weird things. Like the most interesting example from the book to me was that beet juice, which I drink religiously, and all distance runners drink religiously, before races, because it helps nitrate, may actually help men much more than women. And no one has realized that because the studies were done only on men. I'm curious if there are any like shibboleths of sprint training or nutrition that you feel are biased towards men over women that you've sort of understood as you've gone deep into the sport.
See, I don't even think that we've gone as far as to study that, which I have actually thought about a lot and is very frustrating. In fact, I have just taken it upon myself. I've recently started wearing Oura Ring to track my own cycle, just to notice any patterns or changes in my training, depending on where I am in my cycle, because it's not something that is incorporated in our track and field training. We have, you know, kind of a number of coaches who are pretty strict to the book, and we know what to do when it comes to training. But like to your point, I imagine most of it is catered towards traditionally like men's studies and what that looks like and how their training should be done. So it's catered to that. But we don't understand what a woman needs depending on what time in her cycle she's at. and what that training might look like and how that might be different. But thankfully, I have one of the very few female coaches in our sport. And so we can have these conversations and have these discussions, and she has more of an understanding of how these hormonal changes might affect my training and injuries.
So you're choosing, right? I'm going to do weights today, I'm going to do sprints today. By the way, this is an amazing stat. What is the longest you've ever run?
Trying to embarrass me up here. We were talking backstage, and I had explained to him that I've actually never run over a mile.
Yeah.
It's hard. So, so props to all of you who do that.
So when you're trying to decide whether you're going to lift or whether you're going to run 3/4 of a mile or whether you're going to do sprints, you're measuring all of this data.
Yeah, I'm keeping tabs on it for my own personal use and talking to my coach about it so that we can make the proper adjustments. But again, that's just me and my coach, and I'm grateful to have an understanding woman coach who will hear me and actually talk about that. For a lot of coaches, it's not like that. It's their way or the highway. And if there's no literature to suggest that they should change their coaching, then that's too bad. And why would there be? Because there isn't much being done about it right now. So I really like that point, and I'm excited to see where we go in terms of sport studies with women. But it's been pretty frustrating.
I want to ask you a little bit, we've talked about men and women, very different, but let's talk about distance runners versus sprinters also. What do you think about in the race? Like I race and I'm out there for hours and I'm thinking about my kids and where I left my keys, and I'm thinking about like my breath, and I'm thinking about everything. You've got 21.5 seconds. What are you thinking about in those 21 plus seconds?
See, I always wonder that about distance runners. I wonder, what could you possibly be thinking about during that entire time? You want to like pick up a book.
Sometimes your mind goes blank. Right?
Yeah, right.
Like probably the last 6 miles of a marathon, right? I mean, you do narrow down, and you at least I can't. Like I'll have friends who are like standing going, yell, go Nick, and you don't hear them, right? And you've totally, completely blacked it out. And there have been times where running an ultra marathon where you're in the pain cave where you're like trying to talk to the ducks, but you can't see anybody else. The last race, I was in so much pain, I ended up running a couple miles backwards, which I don't think happens.
I don't know how you do it, but
what do you think about?
So you can probably relate, but when you're in a sprint race, you really reach this zone. It's a really cool thing where you actually do black out, and all you're thinking about is you're in competition mode and getting to the line first. When we're in 100 meters, you have about 10 seconds, so you don't have time to think about anything other than, I'm trying to win this race. If someone's around you, you start to panic, you try to block it out. Same thing with the 200-meter race. You have about 20 seconds just to get from start to finish, so you're in the zone. And when I'm racing, I completely black out until I'm about to cross the finish line. And then I'm just thinking, composure. What can I do? It's a very technical race, so I'm just thinking about my composure. Now, if you're in the 400, that's a little bit of a longer sprint, so you have some time to think about your race strategy, but that's about all you have time to think about. Most of the mental preparation for our races, it's all before the race, everything. So sprinting is very mental, but a lot of that comes with how you're tackling that in training and how you're tackling that before your race and the lead up to the race.
So you must have a very specific mental preparation process, right? You must have certain things you think about and certain ways you meditate. And that begins 15 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3, tell me when you turn on to, okay, now it's race time.
That's a really good question. So I have a race on Saturday, and it's a pretty good one. We have some heavy hitters in my race, and so that mental preparation has already started. I think typically it will start when I travel. So once I get to my race destination. So I am visualizing the race over and over again, how I want it to go. I am meditating. I do 5 minutes of meditation when I wake up in the morning, and it's incorporated in all of my warm-ups. So that will look like breathing exercises, and it'll also look like race visualization. And the day of the race, everything is very calm. People love to ask me what my hype-up song is before I compete. I don't listen to music before I compete because I want to be very relaxed in a very stable set. And then by the time I get to the line, that's when I want to be hyping myself up. That's when I want to be utilizing that energy. But up until that point, I want to be very level, very controlled, and my mind just in a very, very calm state.
So you're in the back room and you're are you sitting in lotus pose?
In lotus pose. So, I mean, yeah, so they call us into a call room, as I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, and you're in there with your competitors for about 20 to 30 minutes, just right next to them. And so, yeah, at that point, I'm in the room, and I'm just...
And you're like Arnold Schwarzenegger and pumping iron, like trying to like psych him out in like the most incredibly subtle
Everyone's
ways.
different. Everyone has their fun little call room tactics. I will say that. There's some fun stuff going on in the call room. But no, for me, I'm dialed in. I'm focused because, I mean, to your point, people are doing that. There are a lot of distractions going on right before your race. And so...
What is the most obnoxious thing one of your competitors has ever done to you before?
Oh my gosh. One of the most obnoxious things. I mean, they will literally just be in the call room screaming. I mean, it will be like just outright yelling like nothing, or like screaming really loud, like singing music, right? Something like that, or just bugging you with the plethora of questions, like anything to kind of get you distracted or off your game.
Wow.
It's pretty common.
Wow, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
Does not happen in Masters Marathon start lines. So one of the things that interests me most about running, and as I look back at some of the runners I'm writing about, is that the things that hold you back are often physical. Right? I can't run 21.6, I never will be able to, but sometimes they're mental. And when I was in high school, maybe the most interesting experience that ever happened to me in running was I started running, and I was running like 11:30 for 2 miles. I thought that was as hard as I could go. I was exhausted at the end of every race. And then one day I ran this track meet, and the track was a different size, and so I didn't understand the splits, and so I didn't know how fast I was going, and suddenly I ran 10:48, right? And it was like this huge breakthrough, right? And it was only because I didn't know how fast I was going. And then I have a similar belief about why I improved so much in my 40s is I effectively had to be tricked into, I had been stuck. I had run maybe 10 marathons in a row between 2:42 and 2:45. And I kind of had to be tricked and convinced that I could get myself into a different body and a different mindset in order to go much faster. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever had to trick yourself into believing you could go faster? And how did you do that?
100%. I love that. There's so much anecdotal evidence about this. I mean, my whole training is basically me tricking myself. It's a mind game. I mean, every rep we do, I have to trick my brain into saying, oh, the last one was just a warm-up. It's fine. We're just now starting. I'm not tired. That's how I get through practice. But even in the weight room, it's interesting because I remember we do a lot of Olympic weightlifting, so hang cleans, hang snatches, and my number is 165. It's so hard for me to get past that. I don't know what it is. I've done it before, but when I'm in practice every regular day, getting 165 up is near impossible to me. But I remember one day after a hard workout, going in the weight room, looking at a 145 bar, and being like, all right, let me do my warm-up, lifting it, and then realizing it was 165 pounds. And that's a huge difference. That's 20 pounds. And it's a barrier that I don't know why my brain will not let me go past. But I mean, that just shows how powerful the brain is, how powerful the muscle it is that you have to train. But
so why doesn't your coach take a 185 and label it 165? And then you lift it.
Really good idea. That is a really good idea. I mean, a lot of coaching is, it's a mental piece. It's like the psychology training and the relationship you have with your athletes. And that, you might be a very good coach.
Yeah, you definitely want me as a sprint coach. I've really got it. I've got it all figured out. All right, let's talk about, one of the most remarkable moments this morning was Licia Montana talking here about getting the bronze awarded to her after 2012 Olympics, and one of the women, I think it was the silver medalist, being disqualified. And she was the most emotional morning this morning. And she said, well, I knew that she'd been competing against someone who wasn't clean.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel that? Like, do you ever have somebody beats you and you're like, or not even beats you, maybe finishes behind you, but you're like, there isn't something right? I
think it's very frustrating when you know that people are not doing things the right way in your sport. And I cannot imagine that feeling at such a high stage at the world stage when you really do know. But I mean, I remember watching. A lot of us remember watching, and people know, but you can't say anything, and you can't. It's not right to say anything when it hasn't been proven. So I can just imagine how frustrating that is, and the opportunity, the cost that you lose from that. But I think there's so much that we as a sport can be doing to just help with that, to make sure that doesn't happen to other athletes. I think when you serve a doping ban, it should be a lifetime ban. I think that when you serve a doping ban, you should not be allowed to come back and coach. You should not be allowed to be providing that to other athletes that are already on the circuit, even just young, impressionable athletes that don't know better. They don't know what they're taking. They don't know that that's not okay. And so there's so much more that we could be doing to make sure that that does not happen to any other athletes. I mean, for a lot of athletes, this is really your opportunity to make something special out of your life. It's generational wealth. It's for a lot of athletes that don't come from a lot and they're doing this the honest, right way. You're taking that from them. And that's so just disgusting to me, and I think there's so much more that we could do.
Now, there haven't been many American sprinters who have been caught sounds wrong because it sounds like I'm saying they're doing it. There haven't been many who have been busted or suspended recently. You know, we've had lots of cases of actually distance runners. Is that because the testing is better? Is it because of all the whereabouts work? Is it because, what is it? Or is it just good luck for American sprinters and it's a cleaner generation?
You know, I think it can be tricky because a lot of people will be one step ahead of the anti-doping technology and the chasing, right? And you're just kind of chasing and trying to figure it out. But I do think that there's a lot more in place to kind of combat doping. So there is whereabouts, which is, it makes it really hard for people who are cheating to evade the system. So I think that's really beneficial. But yeah, I mean, I don't know why we're not saying, I wouldn't say that we have a lot of American sprinters who are cheating. I'm not going to go up and say that right now because I don't know. But I would hope that because of the measures that are put in place now, that's why we're not seeing it as much.
So the changes that you would recommend are stiffer penalties, including, there
Absolutely.
are weirdly...
Keep them out of the sport. Like, keep them out of I will say that there are enough people that we know. Yeah, keep them off of Strava.
Can Strava commit to removing every doper's KOMs?
Look, if you are affiliated with doping, if you are affiliated with it, you know what's happening. If you are a convicted doper, you're out of the sport. I think that's what we need. There are too many people polluting the sport right now that we just know, that we know about, and that's what I can't get on board with that.
Right. Well, that sounds highly sensible, and let's hope that there's no one else. You know, I have this feeling. My son is a massive sprint fan. And I was just heartbroken when I was a sprint fan. Everybody you watch gets popped, right? You're like, oh, I love Tyson Gay. And then, oh my God, like how did I? And I just am hopeful, both for the sport and for him.
Exactly.
That they know. It's 7 of the top 10 tens of all time on the men's side have been
just dirty.
Are dirty. Okay, let's talk about your thesis and some of your work on racial disparities in sleep health, right? And one of the things that you studied was, was it people of color or was it black people?
People of color. Mm-hmm.
Why do people of color get lower quality sleep than white people?
Yeah, well, there were a lot of socioeconomic factors that went into that. A lot of it was, there actually was socioeconomic factors and biological factors that were being researched, but nothing concrete as of yet. But just a lot of it with lifestyle, having access to healthcare, having jobs that don't require too much of your time or being out late, stress being a major factor in your sleep health, and all of these things that tie together that cause your sleep health to deteriorate. And the reason why this was so shocking and remarkable to me is because your sleep health is really the primary factor in your overall health moving forward, and especially when it comes to cardiovascular health, which is the leading cause of death. And so, sorry, where was I going with that?
Don't know where you were going with that. But the question was, I thought you had controlled for socioeconomic factors in your research. That there were racial discrepancies based on race even beyond socioeconomic factors.
Yeah, so there were some with biological factors too, and that was really shocking for me. So when you actually did control for the socioeconomic factors, that's when you saw African Americans had worse sleep health than not only white people, but also other people of color. And that to me was shocking. There's a lot of hypotheses around that right now, but there's nothing concrete that I want to put out there. But one of the scarier hypotheses were about how the trauma of the transatlantic slave trade can contribute to that, and the epigenetic changes that occurred during that time led to African Americans having poorer sleep health.
So it's could be potentially deep genetics.
It could potentially be deep genetics and ingrained in your DNA, exactly.
And so the way to study that would be to test the sleep health of black men and women in America versus Africans.
Yeah, exactly, which was done. Yeah.
And
African Americans are more susceptible to poor sleep than Africans.
Wow.
And that's why the assumption is because of the slave trade, right? So there is multifaceted. So one part could be that the slave trade itself caused those DNA changes. But I think a more probable explanation would be the stress and trauma that was that is generational from being African American.
And then how much do you sleep each night?
I sleep. Gosh.
I love asking athletes this question.
I know. I really, really don't play about my sleep just because of all that research. I sleep over 8 hours every night, at least 8 to 10, and I don't make exceptions. And when we travel and when we have to deal with jet lag, it can be really difficult. But it's something that I prioritize. I mean, like I said, it's a primary factor. So if your nutrition is good, if your exercising is good, it does not matter if you're not getting the sleep that you need. And people will say, oh, well, I don't need that much sleep. I'm wired after 5 or 6 hours. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You need it. And it needs to be consistently timed. It can't just be the number of hours you get. If you're sleeping from 9 to 5 one day and then midnight to 8 the next day, that's still not good for your health. And that's also linked to cardiovascular disease. So I really don't mess with it. I'm very, very invested in my long-term health, and I think everyone should be too. It's not just for training. It's important for training, but it's also important for just your long-term health span.
All right, let's talk about the next 100 days. So Tobin Heath up here earlier she didn't quite say it, but I felt like she was about to say, she said that there was a very different feeling trying to win the World Cup when she'd never done it, and that she enjoyed more like doing something new and for the first time than she enjoyed it when everybody assumed that she was going to win the World Cup.
Yeah.
So when you went into the World Champions, so you've been like underdog. I remember as I've watched your career, like the last Olympics, you were underdog. It was kind of a surprising that you did so well. And then in the World Championships, it was like, wow, that's cool. Like, she's awesome. Now we kind of expect you to do really well. So what's the difference?
So I get that question a lot about how Tokyo and training for the Tokyo Olympics differs from training for the Paris Olympics now. And I will say it was a lot of fun being the young new girl on the track, coming from Harvard. No one expected me to run fast and proving them all wrong and then making the Olympic team. Like, that is really fun. There's no pressure involved in that because I'm lining up against, Allison Felix, right? Like, everyone expects her to win. All I have to do is go out there and do my best.
And she's screaming at you in the locker room. Definitely not.
Oh, yeah. No, as you can imagine, she's not one of those athletes in the call room. But then there's a difference in each year getting a little bit better. Last year was probably my first time dealing with all of the pressures that come with being at the top and having expectations, and especially in this world of social media now where people have so much access to you immediately when you're competing, before and after. And so this year I'm competing with that weight on my shoulders, and I am looking forward to Paris. And so there is definitely a lot of added pressure, and it does feel less fun and like a fun activity. But at the same time, it's really exciting when you're at the top. It's really exciting to show people what you're capable of. It's really exciting to have this platform where people can look up to me and I can show them how I'm doing what I'm doing, why I'm doing what I'm doing. It kind of gives me an even greater purpose than before. And before was all about, self-improvement. I want to see how far I go. This is a lot of fun. And now it's really about showcasing that to people. It's about showcasing how far you can go when you do things the right way. It's about beating the odds. It's about inspiring a younger generation of women to do things their way and the way that they want to do it. And so when you have kind of this greater purpose around it, it does have more meaning, but the stress is definitely a lot more.
And so what are you going to do between now and Eugene? that is different from the way you prepared the last time? And you're now on Strava, right? So we can watch you.
I am. I'm new to Strava.
It's got 3 workouts posted?
Yeah.
We can. So how are you going to train differently? What are you preparing? What's the last stage? What can you tell us?
Great question. So I think fundamentally do things the same way that I have been doing them. Things have been going really well. I got to where I have gotten because of how I've been doing everything, so I want to keep it that way. That means staying humble, not skipping workouts, continuing to lean on my coach, lean on my training group, who are incredible, and doing it that way, not thinking that I know everything. I think that's very important and something that a lot of athletes fall susceptible to. But also just I can fine-tune things a little bit more now. So as you know, we have our season and then we have our Olympic trials. So top 3 in each event go to Paris Olympics, and then you have the Olympics. In the past, it's been all about Olympic trials. It's all about just making the team, just get there, and whatever happens after that is fine. And we have that burden because we are American, and we have so many talented American runners that Olympic trials is the biggest deal. And once you get to the Olympics, you can kind of take a breath and relax. But now my goals have shifted, and so I'm looking to actually get a gold medal at the Olympics. And so the Olympic trials, thank you. Thank you.
Now,
so
a gold medal or?
That's a great question. No, I'm looking to collect a couple of them, hopefully.
3 or 4?
Well, I don't want to put a number on it because I know what the headlines will do, but a couple hopefully. And so I have to kind of shift my focus a little bit. You know, the Jamaicans don't have to worry about their trials the same way we do. They get to train for the Olympics, and so I hope to be able to do that. I want to be training for the Olympics, and that shifts our training process just a little bit.
Well, we have 20 seconds left, so the obvious last question. If your mother could choose 3 gold medals or a PhD.
She's still going with PhD.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.